In this episode of the Courageous Public Health Podcast, Dr. Shawnté Elbert shares what it looks like to choose alignment over comfort, even when that means walking away from roles, titles, and systems she worked years to build. From navigating moments of forced transition to rebuilding her work without a platform, she reflects on the courage it takes to trust your own discernment when everything familiar falls away. This is a conversation about courage, identity, and power, and what it means to lead without negotiating your value. You're listening to the Courageous Public Health Podcast, episode 56. To all the courageous women leading in public health, this podcast is your space to turn up the volume on your courage. This space centers your voice. This space celebrates your passion. This space amplifies your courage. My role? To listen, to amplify, and to stand with you in the fight for equity. My name is Dr. Christy McClamrock. I am an epidemiologist, consultant, the founder and CEO of Courageous Public Health, and the host of the Courageous Public Health Podcast. Each week, I have real, unfiltered conversations with women in public health about the challenges you face, the power you hold, and your vision for the future. We talk about the authenticity, vulnerability, and courage that you bring, not just to public health, but to every part of your lives. Because courage is about action, even in fear. It's about taking up space, leading unapologetically, refusing to be erased, and knowing you never have to do it alone. If you're ready to turn up the volume on your courage, if you're ready to take up space, if you're ready to smash the racist, patriarchal, cisnormative, heteronormative, ableist, capitalistic systems, then listen to this new episode. Hello, and welcome to the Courageous Public Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Christy McClamrock. What I've come to understand through these conversations is this: courage is already everywhere in public health. It's just rarely named, supported, or treated as a leadership skill. Every day, women are making high-stakes decisions inside complex systems, often without the structures they need to do that work sustainably. Through Courageous Public Health, I partner with organizations to help shift that, supporting leaders to act with clarity, stand in their value, and make decisions aligned with who they are, even under pressure. Today's conversation is about what it looks like to choose alignment over comfort, to trust yourself, stand in your value, and keep moving forward, even when the path isn't clear. Dr. Shawnté Elbert is a nationally recognized higher education leader with more than 20 years of experience advancing student well-being, health equity, and leadership development across diverse institutional settings. She has served as Associate Vice President of Health and Wellbeing at The Ohio State University, Associate Dean of Health and Wellness at Central Washington University, and Director of Health and Wellness Promotion at Indiana University, Purdue University Indianapolis. In these roles, she provided strategic oversight for multimillion-dollar budgets, supervised cross-functional teams, and led the design and implementation of integrated wellness models that connected health, counseling, recreation, and student success initiatives. Dr. Elbert is also an accomplished educator, currently serving on the faculty at Walden University and Abilene Christian University, where she teaches graduate and doctoral level courses in health education, public health, leadership, and qualitative research. Her leadership has shaped institutional policy and practice across immunization and wellness policy, sexual misconduct education, and DEI-driven wellness councils. She has successfully secured millions in grants and philanthropic funding for student wellness, peer support, and resiliency initiatives. A sought-after speaker and consultant, Dr. Elbert is known for her ability to bridge research, practice, and policy to foster cultures of belonging and well-being in higher education. Her scholarship includes co-authoring Supporting Neurodiverse College Student Success in 2020 and Well-Being Leadership in Higher Education, a guide for successful well-being programs in 2024. Let's hear what courage looks like when you choose alignment over comfort. Hello, I'm so excited to introduce to everyone Dr. Shawnté Elbert. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Christy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about our conversation. And I feel like we have to start. I always like to do the shout outs at the beginning. So a big shout out to Dr. Zupenda Davis for introducing us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I love it. I love it when my previous guests introduce me to my new guests.
Absolutely. And I'll share a list of folks with you too.
Awesome. Oh, yes. I will definitely be asking you for that after we hit stop here. So I want to give you a chance to start by introducing yourself.
Awesome. Well, I'm Dr. Shawnté Elbert. I stay here in Columbus, Ohio with my husband. This coming up month marks 20 years together. September will be 17 years married with our two munchkins, Tori Jr., 14, and Stephen. My stepdaughter is back in our home state of North Carolina, where she's made us grandparents of two already. And so that's a little bit of the personal that makes me who I am. But I would say, who am I on a professional level? I am definitely a person who believes in looking at the work that we do from a very whole person approach and how we serve communities, specifically historically underrepresented communities. And I do that from a varying lens. It depends on what community I'm in and the approach that I need to take. So I don't have a one size fits all approach. But I do that from a place of I was the consumer of a lot of the health and human services that make us serve from a place of deference, but more so it's a reminder from which I've come. And so that is my point of reference on how I do this work. And so growing up in the South of North Carolina where there's real sweet tea, I always remind folks is that, we're very hospitable. My granny helped co-raise us as our mom had us at 18. So I'm an identical twin and a person of very strong faith and moral compass. And so that is an overview of who I am as a person and professional.
And love the mention of the sweet tea. I was in North Carolina. I went to school in North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
I went to East Carolina, Christy, so we are rivals by university, but it's okay because
that's so funny. That's so fun. Well, and also, if you're in Columbus, Ohio, I grew up in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we're like double rivals.
Yes. I've never seen a rival like the one from Michigan and Ohio State in my entire life. It is something to experience.
It is definitely. I agree. And look, we can come together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. So, okay, I want to jump into the first question. And I always want to remind our listeners about the difference between bravery and courage, the way that I see it. So bravery is about taking action without fear, while courage is taking action despite fear. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really interested in courage, this idea of courage. So I would love, I think you're going to also tell me what your definition of courage is, and also share some experiences in your professional and your personal life where you've acted courageously.
I think for me, courage has been something that has definitely evolved over time as I found my voice and found myself. But I would like to say that bravery I would say bravery was more of a challenge than courage. It's not that I didn't have the courage or desire to do things, knowing that fear was probably a stopgap, but the bravery to do it was probably more front-facing for me because I knew that there would be outcomes depending on how brave I chose to show up. And so for me, courage has been something that's not loud, it's not in your face, it's something that's quite deeply personal. And so I've tried to look at it from a place of choosing alignment over comfort, even when there's cost. That's how I'm approaching courage. And professionally, I've had a lot of courageous moments, walking away from 2 jobs where I was third from the top. After working to fight my way up there, I mean, I was never handed a job. I interviewed for every job I've ever received. And so at those levels of positionality, I had influence, financial stability, especially as a first generation college student. and a visibility I didn't see coming up professionally, that I didn't get to see myself in those roles. And so, walking away from those positions that no longer served me or had alignment was very, very hard. And then from the outside, I think for people, they was like, oh, she's stepping out on faith. She's being so courageous. And I was like, okay. But it was from a place of force. And, being in positions where I was asked to resign for no cause and having to take the choice to resign or be fired. So I don't feel like in those moments I felt courageous or brave by any means. I felt that I was put in a position to go into survival mode like I've never been before. I've worked since I was 14. I got a worker's permit to start working. And so for me, it was a decision that none of my mentors had been in that situation at the top of their craft, having to resign from a high level position. But it was something I now know I was called to do. So that way I could build something that was different, that did not quite yet exist and still doesn't as it is evolving. And so that discernment of courageousness required me to trust myself when even I encourage others to trust themselves. I could give it, but I wasn't yet to take it on for myself fully. And it required me to not look at my credentials, my skill sets, but it leaned into my own discernment. And that on a courageous level forced me to start healing around things and reshifting around how I identified, Dr. Elbert at, this Big Ten university, or Dr. Elbert at this academic health department that's one of the few that's certified and accredited in the country. And so it really took me to a point where I really had to look at myself and start doing healing in real time while I was still trying to lead myself, do a different part and pasture. And so it required me to still show up in places where I didn't have the title. I was paying my own way to the conferences and still speaking. I was still the first in many of those positions, and people were still asking me to mentor and to coach others into those same positions I had walked away from. But more so, the courage for me was choosing truth over performance every single time. And I think for me, that courage has been an evolving part of my repertoire. And I mean, if you ask me tomorrow, I'll probably have a different definition, but it really is learning to do this thing without a platform. Courage is not being loud. It is a very personal, inward focused approach to how you take on bravery. And that's pretty much how I've navigated my entire life, especially within the last 4 to 5 years.
I love that you said that courage allowed you to create something that didn't exist before and that's still evolving.
Yes, absolutely.
That's powerful. I think that's how things change, right? That's how change happens.
And I think we always look at things from a place of what's the roadmap? How do I follow in somebody else's footsteps? But the courage is taking for me to be the first in many of my previous situations, the first to be an AVP over all the student health and wellness portfolio in higher ed that didn't have a clinical background. I had a true public health education background, and everyone else around me in that role across the country was a clinician. Licensed either on the medical side, MD, PA, NP, or psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist. And here I am, a health educator by training. Right. So it was tough being the first. And so I think that definitely prepared me for what it would be like to create my own company that is encompassing all the things I've done over 20 plus years working in higher ed.
What about in your personal life? Any good examples of courage that you want to share there?
Absolutely. I mean, growing up in the South, courage of shacking with the hubby before we got married. That is courage to tell my granny I'm going to do that. And so again, not wanting to be disrespectful to the family, and I knew how I was raised, but it was a financial decision. I went from staying with my twin to staying with my fiance, and we got married later on in that year. But I mean, it was courage to break that cycle and, disrespect the guidance that I grew up in. And so on a personal level, it was hard. But then as I elevated in my career, it took a lot of courage, because my career is what moved us to 5 different states. And as a woman, as a Black woman, that is not something that you hear of in our community, that it's more common now. We know that Black women are becoming the breadwinners in their family.
Yeah.
We make up majority of those who have a doctorate degree in the country. Black women make up the largest and most new doctoral candidates. And so when we said we were moving out of North Carolina to Indiana, and everybody was like, "Oh, hubby, you got a new job?" He was like, "No, Shawnté got a new job." And he was like, they were like, "You're moving because your wife got a new job?" He was like, "Yeah." But the story that we're always told was it was the husband, it was the father, the male figure who was moving the family for upward mobility, not the woman, not the wife. And so, yeah, I had a lot of family members on both sides who were like questioning, how do you move your family because of your career? And it was tough navigating those things that were culturally in culturally part of my family versus how do we create something that's new? What does this look like now to have, to still have a 2-parent household where my career is in the front seat? And because he's a truck driver and he can get a job anywhere, it allows us to have that flexibility for me to move up and around in my career. And I always tell people, I wish I didn't have to move. I wish I didn't have to leave North Carolina, and all of our family for both sides is there, but there was no way I was going to get upward mobility if I didn't move. And that's the part about being a woman and being a Black woman that makes it challenging, is that it's not just a glass ceiling for us. For Black women, we have a concrete ceiling. And so that makes it a very different level of courage to take that on fully. And so on a personal basis, it was hard dealing with family, culture, community, our places of worship, questioning. And then at the same time, knowing that I know I'm called into these spaces. The doors are opening. It's quite clear in my own discernment and my husband's discernment. And if we're okay, then that's all that matters.
And then you get to actually create a new culture for your next generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for your family, which is
absolutely.
That's pretty incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Those are great examples. I want to transition into the next question, which is really about authenticity and claiming and expressing your power, and particularly in those spaces that don't welcome it. So yeah, if you could talk a little bit about how you express and embody your courage and what kind of challenges you faced and what kind of strategies you've used to navigate those challenges.
Oh, we can talk about this until tomorrow, but I'm going to be succinct, Christy. I'm going to be succinct. I really try to express my courage, again, through alignment and the clarity that I now have by not trying to perform power. There's a lot of things that we do now that is very performative, but for me, I want to operate in my power. And for so long, I looked outward for confirmation of, I think I got this power, but do I? And it was in so many times in my career, I found myself rehearsing and regurgitating my CV, my resume to, before I would say something, I'm like, I have a doctorate or I have 15 years of experience. I was qualifying myself before actually responding to what was on the table for discussion. And so for me, that hasn't always been easy. There have been spaces, especially within my short time in public health, the public health department, and in my time in higher ed, where being a Black woman with expertise and lived experience and the conviction to do things that was right was perceived as too much. Before it was even recognized as necessary, that was one way. Or those things were perceived as, oh, we need it, we want it, let's bring her in. Then I get in and I'm told, oh, you're too much. You need to tone that down. And I didn't see it a lot earlier in my career. I just saw glimpses of it. And you always think that as you move up the organizational ladder, it gets easier. And for me, it was the total opposite. And I think it was navigating those challenges and those environments that benefited, welcomed my insight and expertise, but resisted my power and influence. That was the tension. You welcomed me, you recruited me. I worked with search firms and headhunters. My inbox was overflowing, and every now and then it still does. And you saw the insight, you saw the expertise, and you saw what I could bring to the table. And then as soon as I get there and start to show up in that power and expertise, somebody has to find a way to diminish it. And so for me, what has helped me navigate those spaces is getting clear on who I am before I walk in the room. I don't negotiate my value once I'm there. And that, I would say, has been since I left my last university in July 2023, that has been my mantra on getting very clear about who I am before I go into the room. And as a colleague told me, I was navigating the challenges at that last university. I was speaking and I had just talked to HR and I was like, this is unreal. I've never experienced this and experienced it at the top of my craft. And HR was like, there's nothing we can do. You just got to figure out between you and your boss what's going to happen next. And I went and did a presentation and I found the courage to still show up and be my awesome self. And it went extremely well. They invited me to stay for lunch. And one of the ladies in the group is a minister. And she pulled me to the side afterwards. And she was like, you are gifted. She said, but I want to ask you two things. One, I want to pray for you. And so, one, what can I pray for? And how can I help you? And in that moment of frustration and fear going on while I, undergirding my presentation, I had the courage to be honest and vulnerable and say, I just need to know if I'm going to be okay. Is my family going to be okay? I moved my family from Washington State here. This is our first house that we bought, and I'm about to be on the chopping block for no cause. And she said, I got that. But then she said this, Chrissy, she said, but do you know whose you are? And do you know that in every space you walk in, God has already went ahead of you? Mm-hmm. There is no space and no place that you walk into that has not been prepared for you. And that, I sat in that moment. I remember that moment, but it was the years later when I'm walking into a space as a consultant where I didn't have to negotiate a 6-figure contract. They knew, they was like, we can't afford you, so this is our plan to get you. Like, I didn't have to negotiate and qualify and quantify myself. They knew it from just a conversation in my CV. And that's when it clicked. And I went back to that conversation. She said, do you not know whose you are? And do you not know that God goes ahead of you into every space and place? And so for me, that is now how I'm looking at that strategy of overcoming what I've experienced. That is trauma in the best way to name it. And not feeling like I have to question myself when to speak and how to frame truth in a way that, people can receive it, and so I'm still mindful of how I show up in spaces. And let me not get that wrong, but I don't do it from a place of fear. It's more of being strategic and making sure that the systems are in place before I bring something to the table or the readiness is there to receive it. And not doing it from a place of emotion and fear. And so I'm now in that space. And that's what I'm designing. That's the power that I embrace. And I've learned that courage isn't just about standing in the hard spaces. It's about knowing when to walk away and create better ones. And that requires a level of courage that, for the first time in my soon to be 43 years, I don't have a W-2. That's a different type of courage for me.
That is courage. That is courage. I had to pause just for myself to write this down. You don't negotiate your value once you are in that room.
I'm supposed to be there.
You're supposed to be there, and your value is what it is. And that is not under negotiation. That's going on my wall. Like I gotta put that on a sticky note.
Take a picture of it, Christy, and send it to me so I can get it printed at Kinko's or CVS. I would say that has been the biggest thing as women, but also as a Black woman. I've been so used to negotiating. You got to do a counter offer.
Yes.
As a consultant, I give them options, but the base price is the price. Yes. And so learning to walk in that power. And I did a discussion for March for Women's History Month. And it was a woman who came up to me afterwards and she said, you don't even understand. Like, we saw you in the mingling part earlier when we were eating. She said, but you don't even understand what you bring into a space. And And she said, and then you opened your mouth. She said, but my question is, she said, Dr. Elbert, my question is, how did you know? And I said, what do you mean? She said, in my personal prayer, you spoke about something in my own personal prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I got an answer for you if you let me. And I remember, so I forgot to also mention, I'm in seminary, Christy.
Yeah.
That's another part of, I started seminary last semester at Methodist Theological Seminary for their master's in public theology. And it really is an evolution of my work in public health and wholeness work. And I told her, I said, I prepare. And I just had lunch with one of my colleagues who's also a consultant. And I said, I've learned that I got to give space in my consulting, my speaking for God to fully show up. So I can't too many slides, too many talking points where I don't have the discernment to allow when something comes to mind to just go ahead and say it. And so there's times that I'll add a little note into a speech or something. And sometimes that's the message that wasn't for me, it was for the room. And that's why I'm very mindful of, in every space I go into, I'm supposed to be there. How dare I not show up?
How dare you not show up?
How dare I not show up? Because I'm not there for me. If I'm called into that space and somebody had the audacity to say, you know what, today I'm going to meditate and pray and I need a message. Let me be the vessel to be in that space to give you what you need, because I'm going to be obedient to the call and to the work we've all been doing about building systems, structures, and programs to serve our community. And I just happen to do it in a keynote for 30 minutes. So be mindful of that. And that's the power that I'm grateful that I've been able to do. Healing while leading is one of my little mantras and things I've been working on is, what is it like to do this work? Healing and still leading this work at the same time. That's the power that we're called to hold on to and not to diminish.
I love to hear about people who are in public health, who have that public health lens, right? We never take off our public health lens.
Ever.
But then people have other lenses as well. And the sort of combined lenses that people bring. I mean, I think that's really fascinating. And to hear that you have this, would you call it a theology lens and a public health lens, and how those two things complement each other?
Yes, they complement it very, very well.
Yeah.
And I wrote one of my papers for my Bible and community and culture class. We had to figure out how we wanted to talk about what type of theological framework. And so I chose womanist theology, no shock to no one. And so I chose womanist theology, and I chose Hagar in the wilderness experience. But my framework still undergirded Zotera's framework for historical trauma, Black feminist theory. And so I wrote my op-ed, and I'm working on the blog to put out sometime this week about Hagar in the wilderness experience, and where is our God in the spaces where we feel alone. And I know that feeling, but the context I used for that was the mass exodus of Black women from the workplace. This is the largest amount of unemployed Black women, and not just Black women, educated Black women being forced out of employment here in the United States. And so I used that, that talking point to talk about how it undergirds the work that we do about feeling like we're in a wilderness experience, and how God showed up for Hagar, and why can't God show up for us now in this season? The God of yesterday is the God of today and tomorrow. And so for me, being able to use my work in public health of we always say with public health, you go to the community, you meet them where they are. But is that not what Jesus did too? So I look at it's the same thing. It's just making sure people understand what we're trying to say, and giving them agency and choice on how they want to live their lives. And so my public health framework is how I'm building out my theological work. And I'm excited to see how that evolves. And I'm excited to launch some stuff over the summer that I'm working on because of it. But everything is aligned. And so if you read any of my Dr. E Speaks blogs, a common theme has been nothing is wasted. Everything has purpose, and I can add power to go with it. And so that has been, my courageous moment. Friends of mine have a courageous podcast, and they talked about that. And I was just like, doing it scared. And the chapter that I did for my book, on inhaling faith, exhaling fear. And you talked about that, Christy. It's not being without fear. It's doing it in spite of. And that to me is the power that I hope all people find, that voice and that ability to find that power again once somebody has been intentional in trying to strip it away.
Well, I'm also very excited to see where you go next. And that leads us to our last question, which is about vision. And, thinking about vision for public health, vision for yourself, vision for your community and your communities. Talk to me about vision.
Oh, I'm so excited because when I was typing up my notes for this, I was like, oh, this is good, Shawnté. And again, good people talk to self. Talk to self. Self, if this good, this is good. And so this is how I feel about my vision for public health. One, I would like for us to stop treating public health and wellness, well-being, because I know people use it interchangeably, but it's not the same thing, FYI. Right. I want us to stop treating it as an outcome and really start to design the work that we do from a public health lens as the infrastructure, the systems that guide how we do what we do. Right now, so many of our systems is reactive. And I can't tell you how many times from my time in higher ed and that almost year working in the health department, and even now as a consultant, we're so reactive. But in public health, we talked about going upstream. But I would love to see that be a consistency, no matter what place you work in, that go upstream. What can you prevent from happening? So that way the outcome is truly based off of systems change and not just, let's plug and play this and see what happens. And you may get a temporary result that's impactful and successful, but it's not sustainable because once other agitators come in and change the foundation, upstream is still going to be upstream, and you don't have those things that was plugged and played, and it's not going to be as effective anymore. And so for me, I'm looking at not being reactive. How do we intervene after the harm is done? But more so, when there is harm being done, we can't be afraid to stop said harm. And we can't be afraid to apologize that harm happened. And so a lot of times when I would come into new positions, that first 90-day, round robin of trying to get to know everybody, one-on-ones, I found myself in my last 5 positions coming in after that 90-day marathon of saying, I'm so sorry that this happened. While I was not the one that caused this to happen, I want to acknowledge it did happen.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry it happened. Now, this is a way for us to move forward, and this is my plan on how I would like to get your buy-in to do that. And so for me, it's being honest about when harm is happening or after it has done. And that for me is how we start to build systems that prevent the harm in the first place, systems rooted in equity. Everybody needs a tailored and catered approach to how we do the work. But more so, the access can't be stifled. It can't be gatekept by the who's and the haves. And I think that's the part about looking at it from a public health framework is that you got many ways to enter this work. And so we don't all have to use the same approach or theory or framework, but there's many ways we can all work collectively together to do this work. And so that's one piece of it. Let's stop doing harm and go upstream and fix the things that's causing it to be a reoccurring thing in our businesses, in our places. And I really need for us to think about just because we are okay. So right now, you and your family may not be struggling. Food may not be an issue for you. Paying your student loan debt may not be a concern, and you were actually able to pay it off. But you know what? Congratulations. But for everyone else, how dare we not provide the systems so that everyone can thrive?
Yeah.
It's not okay for some of us to be okay, but the rest of us are trying to choose between getting necessary insulin and medicine or, going to the doctor to get a diagnosis. And it's so disheartening to hear and see the things that has happening. And more concerning is disheartening to see how DEI has been stripped away when that has been the equalizer. When you still have Black women, educated Black women, dying at a higher propensity during and after childbirth than any other population. Again, let me repeat it. Educated. These are people who have at least a bachelor's degree dying. And when our young sister who is an advocate early this year, passed away after childbirth herself. I mean, it was an awakening for many of us of you can be the advocate, you can be the agitator, and you can still be on the other side and be impacted by the same systems and structures you've been fighting to fix. And that for me is, I just need people to just put on somebody else's shoes, put on somebody else's lens. You know, I grew up in the 90s, so I love Dwayne Wayne. And so, you know, I used to watch the show Go from Cosby and go over. And so, you know, he had the glasses that flipped up. And then for those who are in science, you know, scientists have the different glasses that go up and down so you can hone in and see. Pick a different pair of shades, people.
Yes.
If you don't want to put on somebody else's shoes, at least put on some glasses that give you a different perspective. And so for me, I think about the system is giving yourself permission to look at it from a different perspective. You may not understand it or like it, but at the end of the day, does it make their life better? Does it make sure that kids don't go to school hungry?
Yeah.
Does it make sure that our veterans have and our seniors have access to necessary medical care? They've done the work, they've served our country, and they still can't get access to basic necessities. And that to me is it is a systems issue when all these different populations are all struggling currently in our society. And I would like to see women take our rightful places, because when women's at the top, you know, we fix a lot of good stuff. I mean, the data is there. Somebody cite me later and put some in the comments, but the data has shown when women are in leadership, things tend to shift and shift for the better. And because we have different life experiences and we have that emotional piece that allows us to have empathy even when we don't have understanding. And I'm hoping that my role will be to be able to be a professional agitator. I fully own it now. I know that it's my role to go into spaces and to shake shit up. And I'm okay with that, because sometimes it only happens when everybody is uncomfortable. The best change happens in that space. And I'm hoping that my work has created a pathway for that. And I'll meet some amazing people along the way to help do that. But I really want us to work together. And I want all of our faith-based organizations, no matter denomination, no matter religion, I would like to see that bridge between faith-based entities and traditional structures to start working more cohesively together, because the community work happens really nicely over here in our faith-based pieces, but we haven't found a way to connect it consistently over in our traditional avenues. And so I'm hoping that my work now in public theology will allow that to happen. We're seeing it happening in places of worship where they have a clinic, healthcare clinic, or mental health daycares. But I want to be much more broad. I want to look at it from a systems approach. All the social determinants of health, what systems are we trying to address across our diaspora and in our communities? And so I'm hoping to keep building bridges and help inform that strategy on how we look at humanity despite difference. And that could be through my consulting, my speaking, or even creating new models, frameworks, and ways of doing it. So I really want to be a person that can be a value-based asset, whether on the individual level where I'm coaching or consulting the individual, or working on the organizational level to really look at how we do the work that we do. And so for my own future, I am trying to build a life that my kids don't have to see the same struggle, that they don't have to have the same worries that I and my husband have and our communities have. I want this work to be beyond me. I want it to still be aligned to my calling and my purpose, sustainable, and more so, I want to do it from a place of wholeness.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your authenticity and your vulnerability and your, I love the idea of being a professional agitator.
I'm working on getting some t-shirts made. And it's so funny. The word came to me, Christy. And I was like, I'm not an agitator. Like it has a bad connotation to it, but it's not. There's so many examples throughout history, and whether you bake or you're a cooker, where the agitation is a necessary component for it to be the outcome that we want. You got to mix, you got to use something to mix that, to make bread, to make dough, to make a cake. And so there's so many examples of agitation happening that creates the successfulness of what we consume or use. Why do we look at it when it's a person? You bring in cleaners, you bring in fixers. That's what they are, professional agitators.
Yeah. I mean, we got our professional troublemakers, we got our disruptors, all of those things. It's like we get to reclaim those words.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that our listeners know the best way to get in touch with you. So what's the best way for people to reach out?
I will say I'm mostly on LinkedIn and Facebook. Sorry, I've never given up Facebook. I'm part of the OG crew that started with it when it was just for college students. But I'm also on Instagram. Dr. E Speaks is on Instagram. Okay. And then for Facebook, I have Elbert Innovative Solutions, and on TikTok, I believe. I'm up there sporadically, but I'm up there. I also have Dr. E Speaks. And so I'm trying to build that platform for the work that I do for Elbert Innovative Solutions. And Dr. E Speaks is kind of my hodgepodge. And so that's what I have now. And then for those who are excited to join me on my faith-based work, and as I roll out some new things, that'll be a separate platform, but you'll be able to connect through those same channels when I do that launch. But I'm excited to show the wholeness work, no matter how I do it, whether it's through EIS or through my faith-based work. It's still the same outcome for people to feel empowered to fully show up in any space that they choose to show up. And so I'm excited to see what that looks like. I'm hoping that this open up doors of connections to other amazing folks who want to partner and do some amazing work. So I'm open. Connect with me. Just make sure it's me. If you just look at the picture, make sure it says Shawnté and not Dr. Sheree Watkins, my twin. Because if you type my name in, about a quarter of those photos are not me, but we look just alike, we sound just alike, and we often get confused for each other. So, but
that's so funny.
She's one of the people, Christy, I'll share with you so you can talk to my sister, as she has a public health background too.
Oh, fantastic. Oh my gosh. My first set of twins on the, oh my gosh. Amazing. So yes, please.
My first 2 degrees are in health education and promotion too, school health. And then she went back and got her counseling degree. So she's triply licensed in therapy and all that good stuff.
That's so cool that you're both in public health.
So I'll send her information over, but she's good people too. So if you like her by mistake or connect with her, she's good people. You'll love her. And so hopefully I'm hoping to stay in contact with you and others, and looking forward to seeing how this grows my platform even more.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that all of those links to all of the different ways to connect are in the show notes. So we'll make it really easy for people to reach out. Wow. Okay. Well, I feel hopeful going into the rest of my day. So
thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to share and speak. And I'm so excited to see more public health podcasts and platforms for our work. It didn't exist when I first started doing this work. So we need more of you. So thank you, Christy, for creating a space for us to share who we are and the work that is necessary to keep our world spinning. So thank you.
It really is my honor and my pleasure. So okay. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.
Sometimes courage is walking away even after you've worked your way to the top. Sometimes courage is trusting yourself when there's no title, no structure, and no clear next step. Sometimes courage is refusing to negotiate your value and showing up anyway. Dr. Shawnté Elbert reminds us that courage isn't always visible. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to choose alignment over comfort again and again. If this conversation stayed with you, if it made you think about your own leadership or the women around you, this is exactly the work we do through Courageous Public Health. We partner with organizations to create space for women leaders to lead with clarity, stand in their value, and make decisions aligned with who they are, even under pressure. Because when leaders are supported in that way, organizations become stronger, more grounded, and better occupied, and better equipped to respond when it matters the most. If that resonates, I'd love to connect. Links are in the show notes. Until our next episode, stay courageous. Thank you for listening to the Courageous Public Health Podcast. Visit courageouspublichealth.com to find the show notes for each episode and learn how to connect with us.